Topping today's news, the official opposition holding a press conference today to talk about crime and the death penalty along with the economy. Social services share details on possible reasons for an increase in children running away from home. Prison officers commended for their long service, and Bahama hoops. NCAA basketball is back in the Bahamas. Bahamas. I'm Jcn Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. As the country continues to grieve and express anger over the murder and rape of 12-year-old Adriel Moxie, with many Bahamians placing the blame on the government for not doing enough socially to help the Moxie family and many other families like theirs, Leader of the Opposition, Michael Pintard, today says it's not the government's fault, but that of the parents.
I shift gears to just briefly talk about some of the most unfortunate remarks made by our Prime Minister, where he sought to blame Bahamians who are hurting, who are suffering at this time. Blame them for the very pain that he has helped to inflict upon them. The Bahamians who are making choices between whether to buy food, pay rent, mortgage, or pay their light bills, they have Prime Minister Davis and Minister Sayers to hold largely responsible for that.
Despite Pintard's scrutiny of some parents, he also agrees with many Bahamians that are crying out for the death penalty to be reinstated.
The Prime Minister has had no plans that has borne fruit in helping to reduce the cost of food in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. More recently, he's talked about increasing production of food, cutting imports by 25%. This is 3 years later. The Prime Minister and his team, for all of their claim of bringing sexy back to agriculture, as if sexy has ever fed a single Bahamian family.
All right now.
They have failed. They have failed to reduce imports by 5%. 4%, 3%, 2%. They could not identify a single product, including eggs, that they have reduced the imports by 1%. Forgive me, 0.5%. So we do not take his food security program seriously, and we do not take seriously his claims that he's working with stakeholders to reduce the cost of food being sold in our food stores.
January 6, 2000 was the last time capital punishment took place in the Bahamas, when David Mitchell was executed after murdering 2 tourists on Treasure Key, Abaco. During that year, the murder count was 74. The following year, following the execution in 2000, the murder count fell to 43 in 2001, suggesting capital punishment can be a deterrent to serious crimes. During the FNM's press conference today, Leader of the Opposition, Michael Pintard, also spoke to the Davis administration's failure to be empathetic when it comes to dealing with Bahamians and the high cost of living.
We understand clearly that the tragedies that we are facing as a country is not of any government's creation. The reality is that every parent has the responsibility to socialize their children in the proper way so that they can grow up to be productive, law-abiding citizens.
Mr. Pintard also commented on recent reports that the Davis administration plans to cut the percentage of imported food by 25%.
We are aware that there are some of our children who have grown up to live life in a way that nothing strikes fair in them, and there's no respect for the person or the property, and that no amount of capital punishment will alter whatever mission they are on. But there are some who will think twice and change their course if they know that they can pay the ultimate price if they inflict the ultimate damage, taking somebody's life. But even when there is a deterrent, there is a moral imperative for punishment. And so we are very clear. This is a straightforward issue for us. Capital punishment is on our books.
Mr. Pentard said he was speaking for the everyday Bahamian who, he says, is hurting and struggling to make ends meet and to put food on the table, especially many of our senior citizens. In the past few weeks, teenagers have been reported as missing but are later identified as runaways. During a social services press conference on Monday, representatives from the government agency gave more clarity on reasons behind repeat runaways and what protocol and other follow-up measures would look like. Gabrielle Romer, Assistant Director, says a thorough background check of the family is necessary in their investigations.
Well, we have to do a thorough investigation first and foremost. We have to determine why is that child running away. There could be multiple of reasons. And believe you me, many of our children live in unsavory conditions and they just don't want to reside in those conditions. So we try to find out the root of the problem. And once we find out the root of the problem, we try to work with the family to alleviate a lot of the children running away.
Chief Probation Officer for the Department of Welfare Services, Jcn News, goes into depth on what statistics portray for both male and female runaways.
With the girls, there are times when there are problems with relatives that live within the home. Maybe there's a concern for possible sexual abuse or assault. And then with the boys, sometimes we've seen that boys who are forced to work, you know, they have these extra duties at home because mom has to work as well and provide for the family. There's no support from other relatives to the family. And so they're in situations where they're not comfortable. And then too, you think of peer pressure, you know, the influence of their peer associations. They want to be able to be free and move about and do as they please. And so you have all these mitigating circumstances that they have to deal with.
From January 2024 to June 2024, the Department of Social Services Children and Family Division recorded 39 physical abuse cases, 66 sexual abuse cases, 74 neglect cases, and 1 case of incest. To report the abuse of a child or children, you can contact the department at 322-2763, 322-2763. And finally, in this segment, as the Bahamas Department of Corrections continues to celebrate its annual Corrections Month and 72 years of existence, the Long Service Award ceremony took place Monday at Government House. Some 70 correction officers were recognized for their efforts over the many years. Minister of National Security, Wayne Munro, congratulated the male and female officers for their commitment.
We have to spend more time and attention on prevention and rehabilitation. So these officers deal particularly with rehabilitation. 95+% of persons who go to prison will be released. And so it's important for us to seek to correct the behavior that caused them to go out in the first place. And these officers are on the leading edge of that fight, and they're the ones who we entrust with that task.
BDOCS currently has approximately 800 officers on staff, and recruitment exercises continue. With the coming upgrades to the prison facility, the government is also looking to improve the working conditions for prison officers that can sometimes be very challenging.
I, as much as anyone else, know the conditions in which you work. I had the misfortune in my previous life of having to visit where you work for an hour or 2 at a time. But I am well aware that you work your entire shift in those conditions.
BDOCS staged its Family Fun Day on Saturday past on the prison compound, and they're looking to have more events as they continue to celebrate. You're listening to JCN News. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back following these commercials.